A winter storm in the interior northeast. And wind and rain along the coast. The west is mostly quiet, and everybody else is doing something in between. We'll run it all down for you tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is always brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, in southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. They are Long Island's largest rock salt source, and they've got mulch and sand as well, and everything you need when ever the time comes. And maybe it's not going to be until next winter for some places, but not in others. And of course, come spring, they'll be your go-to place as well to get your home and your garden and your outside of your business landscaped, whatever you need. They got it at Omni, 631-756-1125. The best prices anywhere. The website is
OmniTrueValue.com. Joe.
yeah. And the New York City streak continues. Only a trace at the park. Joe, we're at the. I'm gonna say it right now. I am at the point now where I am going to be, of course, in my forecasting approach remains always unchanged and unbiased, but there's going to be a small part of me that is now going to start rooting for not seeing any measurable snow for the entire winter. I'm not saying that that's going to be correct, but inside now, since we're at this point, let's push it to the end.
Well, the fact that we did not get any measurable snow in Central Park today pretty well seals the fate now of what has been to this point in time the longest stretch for a winter season without any measurable snow. That will be on Sunday, which, by the way, in 1973 was also a Sunday, January 29th. In 1973, New York had 1.8 inches of snow, the first measurable snow of the winter season. And as I see it right now, Joe, we ain't going to see any measurable snow probably for at least the next week or so, which means that we'll breeze on by that January 29th record, actually move into the month of February, and this will become, this winter season, the longest stretch that we have ever seen without any measurable snow at Central Park. Amazing.
Yep. And there was some measurable snow, but I go back to yesterday. I don't know. Was it really winter weather advisory criteria for?
Well, it wasn't up here. I tell you, here I live in Putnam County. They had winter weather advisories for areas north of 287, northern Westchester, and right here in Putnam. And when you looked out the window along about 1 or 2 o'clock this afternoon, it looked like it was snowing to beat the band. Well, it was, but the only places where the snow was sticking were on car tops, grass, tree branches, hardly anything on my driveway. And I would suppose that we might have seen on my deck perhaps 1 or 2/10 of an inch of snow, but that was it.
Maybe.
It went right back over to rain. It's now 37. We're probably going to have temperatures that are going to be in the upper 30s and maybe lower 40s during the overnight hours tonight. And also, we're looking at, in the coming hours, a slug of rather significant rainfall, which could drop anywhere from a half to 1 inch, maybe even a little bit more than that, especially just before midnight tonight. Bye, snow.
Yeah, there was that one band that started to form this morning, this east-west band, and of course, it didn't really get going until it was well north of the coast. So you lost that, and then you had the main area of moisture that came in and got actually a few places in south central Pennsylvania got a few inches out of this. And I noticed on the observations during this morning and this afternoon, there were a few places that had a couple of hours of moderate snow, but then even an S plus in 1 or 2 spots. I think Harrisburg was S plus for 1 hour, but other than that, this really It left me underwhelmed last night when we were talking about it, and it just pretty much played that way, at least from the snow standpoint. We've got the rain and the wind and some coastal flooding going on. Most of the coastal flooding is on the minor side. There are a few pockets of moderate coastal flooding that could occur at high tide. But after this, I was looking at the long range, and I mean, I don't see, honestly, I mean, it doesn't have to print it on the map for me to envision that there might be something somewhere down the road. I looked at the next 2 weeks and I just don't see anything. I really don't.
I don't see much of anything either. Instead of my saying that at least for the next week, no snow in New York, why don't I just say for the next couple of weeks? Why don't I just say for the rest of the winter and be done with it? But of course, you remember that winter of 97, 98, where we had
Oh,
only about a half an inch of snow going into March, and then all of a sudden, 2 days after the official start of spring, we had 5 inches at Central Park. So
yeah.
it can still happen, albeit late, but it can still happen. So maybe something like that will happen this year. 2.8 inches. That's the lowest amount that Central Park has ever had in 169. No, not 169. Since 1869,
All right.
all those years of records, and 2.8 inches has been the least amount of snow for any winter, and that was that winter of 72, 73.
But we should make a distinction here, because I keep coming back to the fact that a lot of people seem to think the entire world wraps around their own zip code. But central New York, western New York, northern New York, central and northern New England are pretty much having a normal winter, and in some cases, maybe more than in some cases, the snowfalls up there have been above average for this up until this date in
Oh,
the winter
absolutely.
season. So this is a phenomena that is uh, dominating the coastal areas. Probably we could say from Boston on southward, and to try to read anything more into one half a season and make some sort of proclamation that this is the new normal is just so utterly ridiculous. It really is, and it comes from people who are just so wrapped up in their snow weeniness, and it's like an emotional temper tantrum pretty much. And I don't have time for that. If I want emotional temper tantrums, I'll spend some time with my grandchildren, who may occasionally go into that mode from time to time. But otherwise, it's silly. The chairman, Scott Briller, is back, and Mother Briller, he says. Mother Briller tonight, she says Central Park will get snow in February. Okay, so she holds out hope that she's got 28 days to get that forecast right.
Yeah, we shall see. I did say something to the effect like that in those years where we've seen a paucity, in other words, a very small amount of snow, that it tends to usually, the greatest snowfalls usually come in such years either in January or in March. So it is possible, Joe, that, contrary to what Mother Briller thinks, we might actually go through February without much, if any, snowfall, and we just might have to wait until March to
Well,
get a significant
I
snow.
brought this up a couple of times. It's obviously becoming. We're at the point now where we're not going into any kind of positive. When I say positive, I mean a favorable weather pattern for snow in the coastal plain anytime soon. That takes us, if the long range is correct, that takes us to February 10th. And as we all know, February is a 28-day month. So, and it goes quick. Not having those last 3 days, for some reason, it makes the month of February seem to go quicker than others. But this may ultimately be that the type of winter where you wait and wait and wait for that one chance for an accumulating snow, and yeah, the clock is ticking in that direction.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Dr. Judah Cohen's latest tweet, and he says, in the real world, sometimes it snows and sometimes it doesn't. And I know, Joe, you'll be looking at this or showing this in just a few moments. But he says, as disappointing as it is when it doesn't snow, we always have the happy hour / pub run model, aka the 18Z GFS,
Right.
to delude ourselves that snowpocalypse and snowmageddon will soon fulfill all of our dreams. And
he's referring to the fact that the 18Z model shows the polar vortex basically dissolving, and starting to and splitting in two, or attempting to split in two, on the last frame. Okay, on the very last frame on day 16. So yeah, he's right. He's right about how he describes it. It is the pub run, because there's nothing else to hang your hat on. So you just run. You have to have, you grab onto whatever there is available, and that's the only thing that that's out there. Ruthless Go points out that no emotional temper tantrums while I'm having an emotional temper tantrum. So I'm not having a temper tantrum. Trust me. You want to see a temper tantrum when I have them? You really don't.
well, actually, he showed the 18Z the GFS total snowfall, including sleet and inches, assuming 10-to-1 snow to liquid ratio, from today, January. Well, actually, this is not today. This was from the run from 2 days ago, January 23rd.
Okay.
Forecast hour 384.
Right.
And on that particular map, there's 19 inches of snow for northeast Pennsylvania.
Oh,
there's
yeah.
There's 21 inches of snow for Boston.
Yeah.
13 for Albany. And you get the idea. Yep.
All right. On that note, let's take a look at what is happening at the moment, and I guess we'll start off with the watches and the warnings, because they've changed this evening. And where is that map? There we go. And let me get myself out of there. So it's all in the Northeast. All the just about all the advisories, except for a handful of counties in Northeast and North Central Pennsylvania, still under a winter weather advisory. The Catskills still under, 2 counties anyway in the Catskills, under winter storm warnings. Winter weather advisories throughout much of western New York. There's winter storm warnings in northeastern New York and north central New York, and a good chunk of Vermont, and just about all of New Hampshire except the South, all of Maine. Advisories in Massachusetts, advisories in northern Connecticut. Those are going to go away in short order. Winter storm watches up for a number of counties in Montana, Idaho, and western Wyoming. But otherwise, except for a little bit of some wind issues in Southern California, and that's it. And there's a couple of wind advisories in South Carolina and also in southeast Ohio, in southern Ohio, and a few leftover winter weather advisories, and a winter storm warning in western Maryland. Is that correct? Let me get close. It's hard for me to. Yes, there's a county and a half under a winter storm warning in westernmost Maryland, Joe. So I'm just going to see what's going on there. At Garrett County is at 32 and fog, and they're forecasting snow, rain and sleet, then rain and snow, becoming snow and sleet accumulation less than an inch, 1 to 3 tomorrow, 2 to 4 tomorrow night. So it's all spread out over the course of 2.5 days. And that's it as far as that goes. And you know what? I'm going to bring up the hazards map. Since we do have some weather going on, I'm just kind of curious to see what the winds might be doing along the coast, because they should start to begin to pick up in short order. Although, if it turns out that the wind is much less of a big deal out of this, I wouldn't at all be surprised. So let me just throw the dew point on. Let's double the density. Let's add some state boundaries and county boundaries. And there's nothing really exceptional yet going on with the wind. Most of the gusts are in the low to mid 20s. And I'm looking at the temperatures, Joe. You got to go. Poughkeepsie's now at 37. I know they had moderate snow for a few hours there. And then it's 36. Now, we were talking about yesterday, remember the uh, winter storm warnings were on one side, and then there was this sort of gap east of I-87, and then
Right.
they were up again for in Vermont and the advisories in Massachusetts. If you look at the temperatures going up that stretch up through Dutchess County, for example, going into Columbia County, Hudson, the station there, the NCAWOS is the provider, is 36. And even further north, if you go to Eagle Mills, which is to the east of Albany, it's 34. And further north than that, in Cambridge, on the New York side, it's 35. So that's what happens in these cases where you get the southeast wind. The warm air kind of funnels up in between the Catskills and the Adirondacks on one side and the Berkshires and the Green and White Mountains on the other. And it's playing out according to that plan today when you look at the temperature profiles here. It's just not that. To say the problem today was it was just not that cold. It doesn't help when you start snowing and it's 40 unless you're getting cold air from somewhere, and it was non-existent, really.
No, in some cases you'll start at 40 degrees. It'll start snowing with, big wet slushy flakes, and sometimes you'll get an input of or an influx of much colder weather moving into the region, which will change the precipitation over completely to all snow, finer snow, an accumulating snow. But that wasn't going to happen because the longer that the snow took. And by the way, Joe, we were seeing, or I noted at least around 10 or 11 o'clock this morning, it was snowing to the north of me, up across parts of Dutchess, Columbia County in New York State, snowing to the north lightly and not doing anything where I was. And I said, well, if the Cioffi hypothesis is correct, it's actually the Cioffi fact is right. When it snows to your north in a situation or a setup like this, you ain't going to get much of anything. And we didn't. It snowed. It was coming down, maybe light to moderately at around 1 or 2 o'clock. But the temperature by that time had fallen to like 34. And I said to Renata, I said, we can't get anything out of this. We're not going to get anything out of this, save for maybe a light coating, which is what we did get. She actually asked me, Joe, because all of our shovels are in the garage, and she, started saying things like, I really think you should have taken at least one shovel out just to be on the safe side. I really think that we might need that. And 2 hours later, and that was it. And
yep,
they ain't gonna be anything to shovel tomorrow morning or even late tonight. No. That's for sure.
But and look at the radar right now. Okay, there's some moderate to maybe some moderate and heavy downpours moving over Long Island, and there's some moderate to heavy rain down to southern New Jersey and to Delaware. But then you go back to the west. So you go into Pennsylvania, to eastern Pennsylvania. It's mostly light stuff. Look at all these holes in the radar. There's these gaping holes. Even up in Vermont and New Hampshire, you've got it. And what's left of that first band has now moved up into Maine, and darker greens and some solid snow going on in the Adirondacks. And that's it. And meanwhile, also in western Pennsylvania, where it was snowing fairly hard this morning in places around Pittsburgh, for example, they got dry slotted. And you can see the dry slot there up through central PA going into western New York. The primary low here, this is probably a good opportunity to just bring up the surface map. So let's do that. If I'm going to talk about primary, secondary, and all that stuff, we might as well have the map up on. But I mean, look, your primary low is in northwest Ohio. All right, if it was in northeast Ohio or northern West Virginia or western Pennsylvania, we probably would have had a decent front end thump out of this. But it's so far left. And there's no real, there's a stretched out warm front here where the isobars stretched out a little bit in North Carolina. There's no secondary or no sign of any secondary here. You just can't do it with a setup like this.
You can't.
No.
There's nothing else you can say. And so until we see anything significant change in the overall pattern, and this may be for a good long time, what you as the late great comedian Flip Wilson used to say, what you seize is what you get.
Yep. And I'm looking back here in the supposed cold air, There's a low analyzed in Wisconsin with a cold front down into eastern Iowa, swinging into northern Missouri. I mean, big deal. Temperatures are in the teens and 20s behind it. I mean, that is not exactly the kind of cold air mass you would see in a situation where you've got a raging winter storm in the east, and then you're getting set for at least some cold Arctic air to come in behind it. That ain't happening either. So it's a very I can't even think of the word to describe this overall weather pattern. It's uninspired. There was just not that much here with regards to this. And then I was talking to somebody up in upstate New York, and they've been basically overcast there for the last 8 or 9 days with between the weather systems and then not being in the upper troughs and not being able to clear out behind it. But you can see on the satellite the moisture coming up along the coast, bright white cloud cover, over New Jersey, over Long Island, down into Delaware and Eastern Virginia. So we have a little ways to go with regards with regards to the rain. But I'm thinking this should all be done by daybreak or before that.
Oh yeah. I think the heaviest will be until about midnight or 1 a.m. Then it will kind of peter out, if you will. Not only the precip, but also the wind, whatever wind gusts we do get. And yeah, I agree with you. I think before daybreak, which should be all but over. And tomorrow, kind of like 80 or 90% cloud cover. Yeah, the sun may come out for a while from time to time and place to place. But tomorrow looks like a kind of a drab-looking day overall, with temperatures mostly in the lower and middle 40s. And Friday, well, Friday will be probably a few degrees cooler, but I think we'll start off with sun, go to clouds. Weekend doesn't look all that bad. It's not really, Joe. There's not much to talk about. But I will say this: this conversation about snow sounds so much like the conversation I was hearing, especially when I traveled with Renata out to the desert Southwest last spring. Oh, it's so dry. Oh, this is so terrible. Oh, we need water. We desperately need water. Will we have any water? No, the long range says we're not going to see any precipitation of significance to alleviate the drought. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is that. And now, of course, nature, which is in full control of things, not man, but nature, turned everything around. And now they're more than making up for all of the lack of water or lack of precipitation or lack of snow that they desperately needed out in the western U.S. And to that, I say, for all of you who are right now saying winter is over, we're never going to see it snow again, we're never going to have a nice snowfall or anything, just beware of what you're praying for or hoping for, because maybe not this year, maybe even not next year, but sometime in the next, 3-4 years, we're going to have a winter. We're going to have a winter where it just, and Joe and I, we've discussed this in the past because we've seen this, where you have these winters where it'll snow at the drop of a pin. Even the most minuscule minor disturbance will come along and drop a quickie 2 or 3 inches on you. And that's how you get 75 inches in Central Park and over 100 inches in Boston. And people start pulling their hair out saying, stop already, stop. I remember, I used to post on my Facebook page a sign that was like out in front of the church. And instead of indicating the latest psalm or the prayer reading that they were going to have that Sunday, they put on the sign in front of the church, whoever is praying for snow, please stop. We're going to have one of those winters in the next, few years.
Remember 93, 94? Not much happened until the last week of January. And then we had, I think it was 17 separate events. I mean, these were mostly all small snow producers, but they were coming through every 2 to 3 days. There were, 2 inches here, 3 inches there, a couple of 4 and 5s. Of course, the measurements, depending on where you are, some places got a lot more than others, but on average, most places got at the bare minimum about 40 to 50 inches in in that stretch that went from late January to about the middle of March. And I remember, you hit a memory chord here because I remember people saying that winter. Uh, I would be in the newsroom and just say, "Here comes the next one," and it got to the point after about the fourth or fifth in a row, it was like, "Make it stop! Just make it stop!"
Right.
Yeah. At the end of the day, and it could, there's nothing that says that we can't have another subpar winter or another 2 or 3 subpar winters in a row. The late 90s we had 95, 99, was it 4 or 5? 5, I think. 96, 97, 97, 98. No, 4. 4 subpar winters in a row. So it's not impossible that we could have that. The 70s and the 80s and 90s were loaded with subpar winters, and they were consecutive. So, and I think actually from 1984, the winter of 83-84 through the winter of 92-93, I think those were 9 winters there, Joe. Those were all below normal winters.
Yeah.
So the 9 in a row. 9 in a row. So either there's people already. I could feel it. People are already saying, "No, not 9 in a row. I can't wait that long." Well, it's happened before.
As I said, but the winters that have had extremely low amounts of snow, at least over the last 30 years, and I'm talking about like in single-digit territory, not 15.7, but let's say 9.2 or 7.6. I mean, for those kind of winters, at least over the last 30 some odd years, the very next winter we made a rather big comeback.
Yes.
I think the year was 3-4 years ago, we had only 4.8 at Central Park. The following winter, we had something like 28 or 30 inches of snow. So next year, and already people are disparaging next year. I've seen on the chat board. Well, next year we're going to be on our way toward an El Nino, maybe a strong El Nino, possibly bordering on a super duper El Nino, and that's not going to be good at all for snow lovers. That's not going to be good. So
they already have it. It astounds me how people already have next year all figured out. I just love it. It doesn't ever stop. It just doesn't ever stop. Let's go back to the maps. Let's get back to speaking of which, why don't we go to our before we go to our friends at WPC, let's go back to the radar and take a look at what's going on. Oh, what happened to the radar? I lost it. All right, let me bring it back up. There we go. So the severe weather risk today is in the Carolinas on south, and there are some thunderstorms now moving through eastern North Carolina. It's actually a nice little squall line there, about to approach Wilmington, and has moved off the South Carolina coast with some more showers back to the west. One severe thunderstorm warning working in there, and there might even be a very small tornado warning has popped up inside that severe thunderstorm warning box. Some special marine warnings happening there. Otherwise, there's a little bit of snow left over back in and around the Great Lakes, and you got a little bit of snow going on in parts of the plains and the central and northern Rockies. It appears that there's going to be a general lack of major storms around for the next couple of weeks too. It's not just here. It's probably going to be. It looks like most of the systems that I'm seeing with the kind of pattern we're in, they look fairly on the flat side. Rainfall. Liquid precip, I should say. I keep getting it wrong. But you can see the liquid precip, and this is all front end loaded in the northeast anyway. It's for tonight into tomorrow, the 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, and you got some inch and a half amounts from New York City eastward through New England. Across the deep south, you're seeing some big rainfall amounts, and those will blossom out with some with a weak wave developing in a day or two, anywhere from an inch to some places in the reds up to 3 inches, and not too shabby on the busy side in the central and northern Rockies. With some areas melted precip of an inch to an inch and a half, which would be in the form of snow. Also down in northern Arizona, and even a fair amount of precip being indicated in parts of southern California near the coast of 3/4 of an inch to an inch over the next 7 days. Now, the snow map. This is over the next 72 hours, the probability of at least 2 inches, and it looks like the entire northern half of the U.S. So we'll start in the east, where we're seeing the likelihood. Now, of course, the day side is lost, so it's mostly well up into upstate New York, all north of I-90, well north of I-90 before you get into the 50% plus and the 80 to 100% probability. Also, with a little upper troughiness and some lake effect in northwest PA, southwest New York, northeast Ohio, down into the Appalachians. You've got a stretch there of 70 to 90% in and around the Chicago area with the next weather system coming with the high probability of at least two for Milwaukee, for Chicago, for northern Indiana, southwestern Michigan, and then across Iowa in through Nebraska, and then it really picks up in Wyoming and in western Montana, a very large area there for the probability of at least two. If we set it up for at least eight, you can see for Montana, a lot of areas there, and into Wyoming and Idaho, looking at areas where it's 50% or higher for at least eight. And in the Northeast, it's mainly confined to central and northern Maine, where you see a 50% higher probability of at least 8 inches. And as far as the long range goes, if you want to really be tortured from WPC, you see the stripe there over the Midwest and in the upper Mississippi Valley, this narrow east-west stripe there. Also in the northern Rockies and up in Washington State for Saturday into Sunday, Sunday into Monday, a little bit well up into the Northeast, and also looks like some in the Wasatch Range and also in the Sierra Nevadas, where it hardly ever snows there. Uh, and in the Southwest, Monday into Tuesday, nothing in the East, and just a little smattering up, up near the Canadian border from the lakes to Maine, Tuesday into Wednesday. So it's a fairly quiet period here that we're going into over the long range. And how can it not? The pattern is just it's very broad. It's just a sort of almost like a bowl of west to east flow. There's no, the short waves are weak. There's not a whole lot of amplitude. That's what we have to look forward to.
Now, the 1st of February, we've been talking about this the last couple of nights. A couple of nights ago, it was indicating that there'd be like a 3 days worth of possible snow to kick off the month of February, and then you said,
anymore.
"Man, that's not going to happen." I noticed today though that the GFS, the 12Z GFS, had snow for next Thursday.
Yeah,
next Wednesday. Next Wednesday.
Yeah, with a front and a wave.
And a Canadian model had rain, not snow. And the European was kind of like in between both, saying, "All right, well, maybe it's rain, maybe it's snow." But that's about as close I think we're going to come to our next possibility or potential, and it's a small one for any kind of measurable snow here in the tri-state area.
I'm just looking at the upper air, and when I say about sort of a bowlish look, if you look at the flow. By the way, while I'm setting this up, I just want to, and I mentioned the chairman Scott Briller hitting super chat earlier tonight. Also, Brandon Doherty hitting super chat as well. Thank you, Brandon. But you see, the flow is just this very broad flow across the U.S. It's the systems, the short waves that are in there are all on the weak side, and they just sort of move along. And going through time, Uh, now on to Monday. You start to see a short wave dropping down the west coast. There's still a flow from Canada. You see this expanding area of cold air with an upper low in northern Hudson Bay. But guess what? That upper low in northern Hudson Bay stays in northern Hudson Bay. So now instead of spreading cold air out all over the eastern part of the United States, which is what the models were doing for days, it's completely backed off from that. And then that trough gets lifts up and out because the southeast ridge just won't go away, and it pops up again next weekend, next Friday. This was a period that was supposed to be cold, and now we've got a ridge here in the eastern part of the United States as more troughing drops into the west, and on and on and on it goes. This is ugly for snow lovers. Just
Yep.
ugly.
Yep.
Just absolutely ugly.
And there's not thing one you can do about it.
That's correct. That's correct. So let's look at the surface map here, and we'll take a look. One thing, as I said, with all of this going on, there's really, at least through the first part of the period for most of the country, there's no real room for anything major for the moment. But here we go. I'm just getting it back to that first frame. It's taking a long time to get there. So here's tonight. You see it here. The low over Lake Erie. No sign of a secondary, really. Finally, you get like a center jump overnight into tomorrow morning to a low that's right along the Maine, New Hampshire coast. That runs up into New Brunswick, where it changes to rain in southern Maine, changes to rain in New Brunswick, changes to rain in Nova Scotia, and that low moves away. Gets a little colder behind it, no big deal. Here's a front approaching on Saturday. Okay, so here's the only chance, Joe. So this front that's coming down Friday night across the Great Lakes and on Saturday into western New York, there's a little area of snow with that, which of course completely disappears and stays west of the mountains because that front actually, much like what happened with the front yesterday, it goes from looking like a fairly impressive front and it just falls apart because of the bit of ridging that's off the southeast coast. So that would be the only chance if somehow a snow shower were to survive and produce 1/10 of an inch, and then that goes out. So now we're into Sunday when we've got some moisture coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, a frontal boundary to the west, and a low in upstate New York. Which by the time we get to Sunday night, it's just maybe a couple of showers. There'll be some rain moving across the southern states. Meanwhile, in the west, that shortwave dropping down the west coast, and you see the low there near Reno, and that has rain and snow going all the way down into Southern California. And in the east, there's a wave that moves off the North Carolina coast at the same time. So we've got cold air here for Tuesday, but it's marginal. The coldest air is back over in the northern plains and in the western lakes. Then there's another sort of flattish wave that comes out late next week. Here's your chance that you could get some front-end snow. That's the only thing the GFS gives here. A low up in northwest Wisconsin with a long warm front going down to North Carolina, and all you can manage is a handful of square miles of blue. So that goes out with some more rain. Then you get a front to go by. It sort of turns a little colder behind that. Then you got a low on day 11. So now we're at February 6th. We have what looks like a deepening low going up to Lake Huron. So that's rain. Oh, look, there's some blue there, Joe. At 360 hours, there's a little bit of blue there. And that's, yeah, it's ugly. It's just, for snow lovers, folks, it's ugly. For winter weather haters, this is just paradise
Nirvana.
for you.
Nirvana.
It's just absolute paradise.
Let's see if we can get all the way to the 14th of February. That is the latest for me to be able to break the record for not having to use a snowblower. Again, back in 2007, at least looking at the records that I have, we had on Valentine's Day, we had 3 inches of sleet and snow, which forced me to take the snowblower out for the first time that year. So I want to see if we can go all the way to the 14th of February without pulling out the snowblower at all. Again, only 2 times we've had any kind of sticking or accumulating snow up here, Joe, was the 1 inch that fell on December the 11th, and today the 2 or 3 tenths of snow that fell before the changeover to rain, and that ain't going to get my snowblower out. That's it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty ugly. Ugly. If you are a
Ugly.
snow lover, if you're a snow lover, this is your worst nightmare coming true right now.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add is that we're probably the one thing you could have maybe sort of hang your hat on. Although I've seen the broad pattern on the models for the last couple of weeks, where it seems that run after run, in a broad sense, shows very little change. So you're probably most times you're better off when the models don't show any snow events, because when they do, every single one that has been that's been shown this winter, not a single one of them has come to fruition for the coastal areas. Not one. Okay, it's batting 1,000, and I'm suspecting that it will continue to bat 1,000 even if it does show it, but. Uh, Most times you're better off when the models don't show things but just sort of hint at things. I don't even see any hints of anything here. So maybe in the coming days we'll see hints of things, but I'm not really holding up hope for for any big surprises here. So on that note, why don't we do a little bit of Briller Jeopardy? It's a short one. Joe, the chat board can play along with us here. What is Iceland's average snowfall in a year? Iceland's average snowfall in a year.
That's a good question. I never really. Is it possible that it might be something that a lot of people would think would be excessive, and in actuality, I would suppose this is based on the capital city, Reykjavik,
Yes.
for snowfall. So what could they possibly get? They're surrounded by water.
Well,
And
I can tell you that one person on the chat board, I'm not going to say who yet, one person on the chat board almost hit it on the nose. Okay? Almost hit it on the nose. I will reveal that person unless someone comes out with the exact number. But anyhow,
yeah, I'm going to say 15 inches, something ridiculous
you're going to
that
say
you think.
15 or 50?
No, 15.
15. Well, it sits out there in the middle of the ocean.
Right.
Okay. Well, just to give a few numbers here from our guessers. Jason Schaefer said 85. Timothy Veltman said 78. 67 for Teresa De Silva. Helen Bertona, 41. Joe Lopresti, 30. Gary Vestas said goodnight. Jacqueline Baxter, 47. Tyler Fienga, 80. Steve LaPointe, 35. Christina Pedia, 24. Brian Cater, a foot. Tom Contino, 42. Frank Riccio, 42. Plain Video, 78. Brandon Doherty, 20. Justin Vale, 39. Johnny Quest, 59. Chuck Gardillo, 71. And on it goes. Mark D, 42. And Adam Lowe hit it on the nose. Helen Bertona is the first runner-up, 40. Adam Lowe hit it on the nose, 40. Helen Bertona, the first runner-up, at 41.
But you see, that's all right. I really well underdid it. But I was saying to myself, a lot of people would think that Iceland is probably almost like the snow capital of the world because they're so far to the north, and yet they're surrounded by water, and that tends to modify the temperature somewhat. I love the chairman. The chairman says between 1 and 49. But yeah, it's not a big surprise that
Right.
a lot of people probably would have leaned more toward 80 or 90 as opposed to 40. But all right,
Right.
that's interesting.
Second question. The percentage that Iceland is covered in ice.
Well, I'm sure in the summer there's not much in the way of ice. I mean, even they get well above freezing during the summertime. But on the other hand, why do they call it Iceland?
Well, aren't there
I don't
mountains
know.
there too? So,
There are mountains. There are
all right, so that
mountains out
that
there.
counts. So, what percentage is covered in ice? Timothy Veltman says 35. James H says 25. Teresa De Silva 32. Joe Lopresti said 5. Christina Pedia is 15. Jacqueline Baxter 72. Jason Schaefer 35. Steve LaPointe 25. Mark D 36. And Justin Vale and Debbie Carroll, Joe, both hit it on the nose. 11%. 11%.
Yeah.
And Adam Lowe punched up 11%. I know with the delay he may have gotten in there beforehand. I'm sure he wouldn't have cheated. Question 3 and the final question for tonight. The lowest temperature ever recorded in Iceland. The lowest temperature ever recorded in Iceland. Mr. Rayo?
How about blah, 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 blah? No, it's not blah, blah. How about minus 35?
Minus 35, he says. Timothy Veltman says minus 18. James H. minus 11. Helen Bertona minus 55. Christina Pedia minus 27. Minus 32 for Justin Vale. Joe Lopresti minus 31. Minus 57 for Frank Riccio. Whoa. Minus 70, Howard Hassel. Some big numbers here being thrown out. Okay, hold on. I don't have a winner. Two winner. Plain video. Plain video. Minus 39. Minus 39. And Patrick Darcy also at minus 39. And David Rico at minus 39.7. Okay? It's actually we'll take the 39s. Okay? Anybody has 39 in their handles on there. It's 39.5 is the lowest ever recorded in Iceland. So there,
and that's almost. And of course, you know that minus 40 is the same both in Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Right. And if you left the show with three things today, you have 3 facts about Iceland that maybe 3 weather facts about Iceland that just maybe you didn't know before tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show. And that's it. Timothy Veltman just put up a link, which I will look at when I get a chance. Oh, hold on. Let's see. I might as well look at it now. It's a Twitter. It's a tweet. So loading. Oh, that tweet is loading. Loading very slowly. Ride. Boy, that circle of doom is just going round and round and round. Oh, here we go. Finally.
Thank you, Howard Hassel.
Here we go. According to Tomer Berg, at Berg Weather, a minor sudden stratospheric warming event is now underway, but fails to meet major stratospheric warming criteria as zonal zonal winds fails to reverse and quickly returns back to above average by early February as the stratospheric polar vortex returns to the pole. 2 carriage returns, 8 line feeds, 4 ends. That's it. It's over. Goodbye. But then he says the story doesn't end there because apparently I guess there's another one coming afterward. I'm not sure what exactly I'm looking at when I'm looking at this chart. So I'm just going to assume that that's what he means by his final line, where he says the story doesn't end there, however, ... So, or unless that means that we go to a wrapped up polar vortex that stays wrapped up right through the end of the month of February, which is not good for winter weather lovers.
No.
So anyway, so much for that, and that's what we'll leave you with. No hope. No hope. So what about tomorrow night? We're at 8 o'clock. Friday
That's
night. Friday night.
that
We're going to be on at 7:35.
the 8 o'clock time tomorrow is, I'll put it this in quote marks, tentative. I'll explain the tentative after we're off air to you, Joe, why
Okay.
that may be tentative. So
Okay. So all right, and we'll be on. We're going to be on Friday. Why I don't know, but we're going to be on, and we may push back. Sunday is at 11 a.m. Outside chance we might push it to 7 p.m. Or if there's absolutely nothing to talk about, we may just take Sunday off. But we'll let you know on Friday what the deal is. Okay, so everybody, thanks for watching tonight. Howard Hassel, a late super chat hit from him. Thank you, Howard. Also to Brandon and Doherty and the chairman, Scott Briller. And we're glad that Mother Briller is well, getting back to her good old self. And we'll see you tomorrow night at 7:35.
And my final words of the night: happy natal day, happy birthday to our good friend Craig Allen of CBS News Radio 880, who turned today. Happy birthday, Craig.
He's older than me.
Yes,
okay?
he's older than
me, and I will always rub that fact in.
And he's younger than me by 5 months.
Right. All right. No, yeah, you guys are way older than me. We'll see. We'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Good night.